We're almost done with the basics. Before we move on to styling other pages and screen sizes, we need to build out our navigation and finish up a few other things on the page. First, let's fix up our header. Right now, there's some odd space up at the top. That's happening because the first level headline is pushing it out of the way with its margin, and there's just not enough space. So let's go ahead and find our heading here. And then up at the top, we'll select our header. And I'm going to do a few things. First, I'm going to float it to the left. I'm going to set the margins so that 0 on the top, 0 on the right, 30 pixels on the bottom, and 0 on the left. So there's 4 values there for top, right, bottom, left. Then we'll set the padding. Similarly, we'll use 4 values, so 5 pixels and then 0, 0, 0, making sure to put spaces in between to separate the values. And again, that's 5 pixels on the top and then 0 on the right, bottom, and left. And if you're having trouble remembering the syntax when you use 4 values like this, just remember that you start at the top and then you go clockwise. So you go from top, right, bottom, left. So let me explain this code in a little bit more detail. Floating it to the left doesn't have any practical use right now, but it will later on when we style our desktop layout. So stay tuned for that. Setting our margins keeps the header separated from other content, at least on the bottom, but removes the problematic margins that we had on the top previously. Then we add some padding on the top to separate the text without actually removing the margin from the top of the page. Now there's one more thing we need to do to make this work. We need to set a width of 100%. It's now a floated element, which means it doesn't have an explicit width anymore. We want to specifically say that this element should stretch across the entire page. So we've set a width of 100%. Now, let's refresh the page and see our work. It looks good. Now, let's dig into this navigation. Right now, our navigation is an unordered list. So we're actually going to use a similar technique that we used on our gallery, which is also an unordered list. First, I'm going to select the unordered list element and set some margins on the left and right, remove any padding, and then remove any bullet points. So let's scroll down to our navigation here. And inside of our navigation element, we have our unordered list, and that's what we'll want to style. We want to set the list style to none. Even though there were no bullet points that we could see, we still want to make sure that we're removing those anyway, just in case. Then we're going to set the margin to 0 and 10 pixels. So that's 0 on the top and bottom and 10 pixels on the left and right. And then we'll set the padding to 0. Now, I'm going to use a new property I haven't shown you before, and it's called display. Every element has a display property by default, and it's set to either block or inline. Block level elements will take up space on the page and appear to push other things out of the way. These are things like sections, divs, and many other elements. Inline elements are mostly just text. For example, when we add an anchor element inside of a paragraph, it doesn't push all of the words out of the way or push anything to the next line. It just appears in the same line, or inline, as the rest of the text, hence the term inline. We're actually going to use another property, though, called inline block. This will allow us to have these items side by side just like inline elements, but they'll retain other block level features such as having a width and height. So let's say nav list items display inline block. Now let's save and refresh the page to see how that looks. Awesome. Now all of our links are in a nice neat row, just like that. So in other words, they're in line with one another, but they still have some block level properties, such as having a width and height.